Okay, so what I want to do is I want to render this in Vray. Okay, and I want to plant this little insect into a scene. Okay, so what I'm going to do, first off, I'm going to make sure, do we have Vray on? It looks like I have Vray on. Okay, remember if Vray isn't on, you got to go to Window, and then if I go down here to Settings, I got to go into the Plugin Manager, and ensure it's down near the bottom here, Vray, Loaded and Auto Load. Remember, sometimes when you crash, this thing turns off, and then you have to make sure it's on again. Okay, cool. Now, what I want to do is I want to get a picture in the background, and so in Vray, what I want to do is, let's see what I have here for overrides. I got viewport subdivision on. Okay, cool. What else do I have over here? V-Ray. I've got progressive renderer on. I'll probably switch that to adaptive. And I usually put this on 32, and I notice it goes just a little bit faster. Okay. Back here at overrides. Under environment. And I go here to environment, override environment. What this will do is this lets me put in a background image, and it also lets me have a reflection image if I want to, and a refraction image. But what I'm concerned about is this background texture here, and that is putting an image in the background. I'm going to go and hit the map button. I'm going to find what am I smoking? Okay, there we are. The file textures right there. And if I hit this, it'll open up the attribute editor. I'm getting a warning. Oh, whatever. I don't care. I'll worry about that later. Okay, and you stupid. I hate the auto docking feature. It drives me batty. Windows, workspaces, disable docking. Freaking hell, that drives me nuts. And now I've lost my texture. Okay, let's go this way. I hit that again, and boom, I'm back. Okay, so there's my file texture. I'm going to go browsing. And I think I found something that I liked. Let's go there. Open. Okay, it's in the background. If I do a quick render right now, let's hit the render button. Okay, you'll see it's all skewed. Looks like the bug's going to get hit. Someone stop it. Stop it. If I look, the V-Ray place environment texture by default always goes to spherical. So I'm going to switch from spherical to screen. And now, when I render, my problem should be corrected. Okay. Now, maybe I want to kind of line up this image, and I've got like I just want to kind of put like a flat plane on the ground. I want to cast a shadow from the insect onto this background. Okay, I'm not going to do anything crazy, just all really, really simple. So, first thing is, we need some kind of ground plane. Do I need to do anything else here? Not right now. Okay, cool. There's an option here called Show in Viewport, and you'll see that when you have Show in Viewport, if I'm in Viewport 2, I can't see it. But if I go to Legacy, whoop, there I can see the image. Okay, great. And I'm just going to do something. If you kind of look at the grid, you can kind of figure out how to line this up. And remember, this is not perfect. I need to actually change my camera and other things, but I just want to kind of plant it on this shot here. Okay, good. Something like that. And I need a ground plane. So for the ground plane, in my case here, since it's flat, I'm going to go here to Create, V-Ray, and V-Ray Plane. And I'll pull this up. And what that is an infinite plane that renders forever and ever. Okay, so now we can see it blocking out everything here. Okay, great. And if I go in and I right-click, Assign New Material, I'm going to use something called the V-Ray Wrapper. V-Ray Material Wrapper. They should call it like V-Ray Wrapper Material. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just get used to that. No, then there's the car paint material at the end. Anyway, I'll stop getting annoyed by these little inconsistencies. So, I get the V-Ray Wrapper. First thing I do, put on Matte Surface, Alpha Contribution, -1, Shadows, and Effect Alpha. Okay. And then I go to the base material, and I'm going to plug in a V-Ray material. This is that one kind of funky spot on the wrapper that bugs me, okay, is having to plug in a base material into this. And let's take a render now. So I'm just going to hit render. So now we can see through it. And do we see any shadows? No, we don't see shadows yet. We don't see shadows because we don't really have a light in the scene. This is the default light. There's a kind of like a directional light that's hooked up to the camera that just shows up at render time and then disappears again. So I need a light. I'm just gonna go and close this down. Close this down. I gotta figure out something first. Where are the shadows coming from? I see a big shadow over here, so I'm gonna assume that there's a strong light coming from this direction here. And I could do this a few different ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Lights, and I'm going to create V-Ray Rec Light. And then I'm going to go to Panels, and I'm going to look through Selected. And I'm looking through the Rec Light right now. The plane in the background, if it's bothering you, don't worry about it. It's just because I'm looking through the light. I just got to remember where the hell I am. I was coming through, let's see, I figure the shadows, coming through something like this direction here. Okay. Even though actually the insect is in the midst of the shadow, I think it looks, I'll say it's going to be something like that. Okay, and I can zoom out. Here I'll go back to perspective view. And let's render it. And does that affect anything? It doesn't affect the photograph at all. We are getting shadows, however. And it's also a very weak light. So I'm just going to go in and hit the attribute editor. Come on, hurry up. And the render suddenly went really slow, and now it's speeded up. Okay, good. Oh, do I have a big? I have a big recording window. Okay, whatever. I thought I resized that. I'll move this over here. So if I go in here and I want to increase the intensity of the light. Either if I want to soften out the shadows, I can increase the U and the V size, and that's going to soften out my shadows here. I'll put the little teapot red render region on. And now when I render, it'll only render the area here in the teapot. And that kind of softened it out kind of nicely. Added a bit of light to it, actually almost the right amount. Okay. Except I've got very dark shadows. That's a bit weird. That was actually a really good guess what I changed over here. You could change the intensity as well if you want the sharp shadows and you want to give it a stronger light source. Okay, but if you want softer shadows, increase this thing and you decrease the intensity multiplier if it gets too hot over here. But next thing I'm going to do, just to kind of fill in the shadows, I'm going to go to lights and I'm going to create the dome light. Boop. And when I create the dome light, you might see when I render the whole thing, okay, we get this big white cutoff up here. Okay, but let's go and render right around here. By the way, if I put this little button on here, it'll render around where my cursor is. Okay, and you can see that actually lit up this insect quite a bit. That's not too bad. Okay, it's giving it some nice fill light. I can maybe bring the intensity of it down if I wanted to. And it's also taken that shadow and it's lightened it up. And it's also lit up underneath this. It's almost, the dome light's almost like a fake global illumination effect. Okay, so that's looking better. And anything there, okay, great. And then when I go up here, you see all that gets wiped out and it gets white. Okay, so what that is in the options on the dome light, that is a thing here. I can make it invisible. When I make it invisible, you'll see that renders in now. So the dome light kind of now invisible. I'm just going to hit escape on that. Okay. If I don't want that big white thing to show up in reflections, I guess I'm really reflected. I can turn that off too. Sometimes that kind of gets annoying. Anything else? I think that's okay. So we've got the shadow. We got it planted here on the ground. And if I need to render out my sequence, then I can just go here to Common. And there's the animation section right here is disabled. You make it standard, and then you figure out how many frames you want to render. So maybe I want to render out 200 frames. Okay. And anything else you need to know here, then you can either... Actually, because we don't have this render animation only in batch mode, if I had that on, then I'd have to go to rigging, switch to rendering, and go render, batch render. Okay. Or I can just hit the render button, and if I turn that off, I can hit the render button, it'll render out the whole sequence. Okay, so that's it. That's all you have to know. That's 10-minute mark. Okay, for rendering this out. If I want to go beyond, though, if I want to do something really kind of cool, okay, I'll show a few more things. These are extra things. Okay, so let's close this down for a moment. And in here, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to create a polygon sphere. Okay, and I'll just hit D and V, and I'll move my pivot point down to the bottom. And if I hold down X, okay, I think that should put it roughly on the grid. And I'm just going to make it big. And I'll hit 3. Okay. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to assign a V-Ray material to it. Okay, so I got this V-Ray material on. Let's just go and turn up the reflections on this. And I'm going to turn off Fresnel. And then when I render, I'm going to have this big sphere sitting right over here. Okay, it's got reflections on. So it's picking up the reflections of the sky are black. Okay. And right now this is white here. And that's actually just picking up the infinite plane. The infinite plane isn't pushing any texture out. Okay. So let's just go and hit. But you can over here, you can see the bug. Okay. And you can see the shadow that this sphere is casting on the ground as well. Okay. So it looks like it's slightly floating in the scene just based on the distance of the shadow to the object. Anyway, just kind of finish off. My cursor over here for a second, finish that. Okay, you kind of get the idea. It looks like it's kind of in the scene, but not quite, because we're not picking up the reflections of the ground. So the reflections of the ground, if I can grab the V-Ray plane, and let's see if I hit focus, do I see the wrapper? There's the wrapper. And if I travel down into the V-Ray material that was hooked up to the base color of the wrapper, if I go backwards, base material. Okay. In here, what I need to do is get this background shot into the diffuse color, and it has to be hooked up and looking through the camera, okay, or projected through the camera. So if I go in here to diffuse color, I hit the mapping button. When I choose file texture, if I right click on this, I get an option to create as projection. Okay. And with the create as projection, this projection node, I can switch it so that it's using a camera. And then I say projection type, perspective. Then I go to camera projection attributes, link to camera, perspective shape. So I just have the one perspective shape camera that I'm rendering from. Then I can go over here, image name, I got to go browsing again. And I got to find that Jane Street in Toronto. Great. And now when I render, you should see it picking up in the reflections the ground. And there we go, it's starting to happen. Okay, actually something's off. Is there something I'm missing? Seems like this crack here. I guess that would be over a little bit, so that'd be working. Then up here we're starting to see some issues here. That's getting quite warped. What would that be? It's not flipping anything. Actually, that one's showing up here. Great. Okay, we're still getting the insect over here. But one thing I don't like is I don't like, we don't like the big black spot. We can see the light, by the way. That's my rec light right there. The rec light is showing. I just hit escape to stop the render. The rec light showing up, so I could go and find that. Let's see if I can do this. Did I select it? No, of course not. What if I do this? Does that get it? Okay, and I can go in here to the options, and I can say affect reflections, and if I turn that off, that should be gone. Okay, I'm just going to hit escape, so that's out of there. And so we got that. We just don't like this big black bit right here. If I go into the render settings and I go back to the overrides, reflection texture, if I just go ahead and I hit this, and I'm going to put in that same freaking file texture again. I'm just going to see if this works. Let's go to the attribute editor for that one. And I'm going to use it again. Boop. There we go. Open. And I'm going to leave it spherical. I'm just going to see if it works. And I'm not looking for accuracy. I should be maybe using a different HDRI image in there or something. But Here we go. We should see... There we go. We see this building here being warped over there, but we can kind of pretend that maybe this building here is replicated over here somehow, and yeah, I'm just being... Yeah, it looks like it's reversed or something like that. So, anyway, now the big problem is down here, they don't really seem to blend. Okay, so we're getting this nice reflection here. Maybe I'll let that finish. Because what I want is the two things to kind of blend together a bit. Okay, so I want these two images to kind of blend. If I go back to this object here, and there's the V-Ray material on it, reflection, if I go into advanced reflection, remember you don't have to do all this crazy stuff, but there's something called dim distance. And with dim distance, if I pull this down, you can actually see it's dropping off the object. That'll be where I start to guess from, and I might do the dim fall off. So now it has a cutoff that this will go out looking for reflections on the ground here, and then with this dim fall off, it's going to blend the two. So now if I go back and I render again, let's see what happens right here. Really want to get rid of this little section here. It looks like it's almost working. Not blending very well. Now there's a nice cutoff. The hell's that thing? Okay, just going to hit escape. I'm going to go back and I'm going to take the dim distance and I'm going to bring it down. My scene might be pretty small. See how that blends? Still not working. There's something funny going on right there. There's a kind of cutoff happening. But they are kind of blending down below. Okay, I might have to think about this one a bit more. But it still looks a little bit more interesting on the sphere, right? How these two things are blending together. That's really weird. This almost looks like it's picking up this thing in reverse. Okay, I'm going to hit escape on this, just to say we're done with the render. Anyway, that gives you kind of a nice fake here for reflections. So, if I was looking at the bug, and I wanted to have some kind of reflections on it, if I go into the reflection color, I could bring that up. Oh, that's reflection advanced. I'm over here, reflection color, so my bug can have a bit more reflections on top. Got Fresnel. The Fresnel, if I have it on, it's going to make it so when I'm looking straight on, I'm not seeing a lot of reflections, but on the edges I'm seeing reflections, and if I had a nice texture on this, this might look kind of cool. Okay, now we're seeing little minute reflections. And anything else? I might have a little bit of glossiness on, okay, and that'll blur the reflections a little bit. But this is just overall going to make the insect blend into the scene a bit more. Anything else I want to say about this? I guess there's one more question that sometimes people ask me about, is kind of making that nice difference in color. So when you see the color of the insect looking at you, it's slightly different than when it's on the edges. Okay, thought I hit escape already. Okay, if I go over here to the reflection color and I browse, this time around I'm going to pick a ramp texture. I'm just going to go to the presets and I'm going to replace with rainbow. A rainbow preset. And then with this, if I go into the hypershade, and I think I've got this selected so I can hit something like that. Okay, great. Right here, there's my ramp. I'm just going to get rid of this Place 2D texture node that came with it. And then I'm going to go over here into utilities and I'm going to look for something called the sampler info node. And again, this is starting to go into, potentially when you're first learning this stuff, this is going to seem like witchery. And I'm going to take the facing ratio, and I'm going to plug that into my V coordinate. All I did was click and drag and click over here to the V coordinate. And then you will see that when I render this time around, there will be a kind of different colors added to my reflection. And this is going to take for freaking ever. Okay, you can start to see a little bit more, maybe a green kick in there. And there's a little bit of a blue kick on the edge. If I go back to this thing. Okay, there it is. You can see something's happening here. So with my reflections are up, it's my Fresnel is kind of killing it a little bit. There we go. So if I render this again with the Fresnel off, you should be able to notice that my reflections are coming through, but they've got a green tint and a blue tint, and that's going to follow my camera if I rotate it around. Okay, and you can also just take the reflection color and bring down the amount so it isn't quite so reflective, so you can see your textures underneath. Okay, or you can use the Fresnel, and then you can do all sorts of funny things with it. With the Fresnel, you can adjust the Fresnel IOR. Okay, I'm going to hit escape. Escape! Escape! Okay, there we go. Come on, stop! 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 For the love of God, stop! What are you thinking about? Why are you spinning, little blue wheel of death? Okay, there we go. Anyway, I can start to play around with the Fresnel on this thing. And turn the Fresnel, lock the Fresnel, and I can bring this up so they'll blend a little bit different. You can see that adjusting over here. Maybe if you want to change your highlight, you can bring your highlight down. You can see I get a nice hot speck, and it kind of bleeds out a little bit. And so that my reflection glossiness, this will blur my reflection image, right? So I've got it independent from the highlight. Anyway, I'm going to stop right around here. This has gone on long enough. And I hope this makes sense. Maybe I'll render this whole sequence out afterwards. I'll get rid of my big blue ball, and that'll be it.